Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast. Learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 51, and I'll be speaking with Danielle Meadows. She's the owner of a 12-year-old digital branding firm, Octane Design Studio. She's a podcaster, wife, mother, lover of chai tea, comics, cosplay, and live MMA. Danielle is a blended family advocate as both a biological and adopted parent of 4 beautiful boys. Her children's attributes range from special needs and interracial heritage to hormone growth spurts and challenging independence. Her youngest is currently 1 year old. As much as Danielle is passionate about providing creative services, she strives to be more than just the graphics she creates. Over the years, her hashtag More Than Graphics has become more than just a marketing slogan. It's become a life principle for herself that she executes through storytelling and life chronicles as a producer and co-host of More Than Graphics podcast. Hello and welcome to Danielle. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to have you on the show to delve into this conversation about what does design look like and how did it move through your world professionally and personally, because that was quite a whirlwind for you, right?
It was. It definitely was. It was a personal uphill climb, but a beautiful pivot as well. So I like the fact that I can continue to share the story and it continues to inspire people.
Beautiful. And that's ultimately what we're here to do, I feel, right? Is to a certain degree inspire others so they can step into their own craft, their own mastery of what is it that feeds their soul. Mm-hmm. So what do you believe about yourself, and do you feel it defines who you are?
I definitely think that what defines me is my ability to not follow the norm. And that has also helped me open my eyes in other areas of both my personal and professional life as a mom, as a designer, as a person who wears all the hats. I definitely want people to see and embrace differences and using that as a superpower tool and a super weapon, if you want, to wield the next chapter for themselves.
Beautiful. And it is interesting how we have control of that to a certain degree, but sometimes that gets left behind, or we feel we don't have control of it because our societal systems have somewhat dictated what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what it looks like, what it doesn't look like, which makes it all a little muddled and difficult to navigate, to step into, this is how I want to design my life.
Right. Absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's very stifling for women in not to compare 50 years ago to today, but it's still very stifling for women to step out into their own, to seek authority, to present themselves as an authority figure, to have power. All of these themes, these words that I'm mentioning are things that were still a struggle 50 years ago, but even more so still a struggle in modern day times. And so I think it's really important that we hold on to the promises that we make to ourselves. And we hold on to the energy and the power of knowing that we come from a lineage of women who didn't have the pieces and still found a way. I think it's really empowering and encouraging for women around the world to know that they come from such a place that they are valued. And I think as much as the world sometimes, especially society, tells us in the corporate workplace that we not necessarily can't, but it's not great, or it's kind of frowned or shunned upon. Sometimes we feel that way working that average 9 to 5. Even in as entrepreneurs, sometimes we carry those vices of I can't, or I won't, or I shouldn't. And it's again kind of leaning on that encouragement that yes, you can. It's been done before. The people that have gone before me have done it before. I will go and I will do it. I will keep going. And it's that encouragement that really kind of trailblazes this whole nother attitude or euphoric place in our minds that we are capable and we are powerful to do anything.
In that space, from what you've just shared, what do you feel is your calling in this life?
I think it's to go, to empower people, to inspire people. And I choose to do that through my gifts of design. And so a lot of people, specifically women, 60% of our clientele are women, and they come to us and say, I have this idea, but I don't know how to get it off the ground. Or I'll have a friend come to me all together and say, Danielle, you are a mom to multiple ethnic children. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? And so from this place of each one teach one, coming from a long lineage of entrepreneurs, I'm a third generation entrepreneur. So I know what that's like to be able to define your own destiny without being told by the world what you're supposed to be. And so I think it's really cool to be able to kind of wield that. So I just kind of innately understand that sometimes you just go. Sometimes you just have to do it. You have to step outside that norm, even if it's just uncomfortable for a little while, to be able to move past the mountains, to go up, go past the hill, skip past the molehill, things along those lines. So yeah, that's what I feel like my calling is.
Beautiful. So there seems to be a bigger connection to your ancestry, your lineage, your heritage, and your culture. Has that
Absolutely.
always been the case for you, or did it heighten at a certain time in your life?
I definitely think by having children, I gained a deeper purpose for what I wanted to do. And some people feel like that it goes backwards, right? I like to say in my life, I did things backwards. They say, first comes love, then comes marriage, then come kids. I did all backwards. So it's one of those situations where you have to be kind of bluntly aware and going down that path or going that path and understanding kind of what your resources are, what you're capable of doing in that moment, and then also better understanding where you could go based on the fact that you didn't follow that traditional path. You didn't go the normal way. You've watched other people, again, aunts, uncles, parents, cousins, that are now entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, business owners in their own right, before the world told them you have to fit this box. You have to check this place. You have to feel this need in the world. And I think it's just really cool that I've had so many different influences on that path, that it gave me all this courage to really kind of forge my own, and also encourage other people who are alongside me to forge their own, and to remind them that, passing the baton is just as formidable as being in that lane. So that's something too that I feel like has been a huge influence on my life.
Oh, yeah, that could definitely influence a lot of directions of where life unfolds and how it unfolds. Absolutely. What do you feel are some of those attributes that were either created or garnered to build that purpose for you?
I feel like it's a lot of, I don't want to say rebellion. I don't, that sounds like, but it's always just going against the grain, being different. I grew up being the different kid. I was a lot of ways, I considered myself the ugly duckling, right? In a lot of situations. And so it was just kind of, I'm different and I'm okay with being different. I'm empowered by being weird. I didn't want to be like everybody else growing up. And so it was one of those things that just kind of always stuck with me over time. And now that I have my own weird kids, they're all just kind of like, yeah, we're all weird together, mom, and it's okay. So I love the fact that we celebrate our differences. And for a lot of people, that is a little bit of a struggle because they kind of do the comparison game. They see what the Joneses are up to. And we feel like the state of comparison kind of drives our lives in areas. For me, it was always being proud of who I am. It may be broken, it may be hurt, it may be ugly, but you know what? It's me and I'm going to celebrate it. And also understanding too that as we learn and grow in life, our views, our actions, our emotions are also going to change.
Mhm.
Watching my children grow into their own emotions and their own people. I have two teenage boys,
Wow.
and two more underneath that. And so it's really
Wow.
cool to see this escalation of growth going from a childlike process
Yes.
to a more formidable adult process. And so appreciate seeing yourself in each
Mhm.
of those stages. I think that has been one of the most rewarding reasons why I'm so fiery about what I do and how
Mm.
I want to do it in the world.
Yeah. That is really interesting of how your perspective of life changes when you bring life, be it a human being or be it a book you've published or
Yes,
something that you have birthed
exactly. Yes. I
into the
definitely didn't want to
world.
limit it to children. I definitely just want to birth anything, an
Yeah,
idea, as you mentioned, a book. It could be anything. It's really the something that you're very strongly get behind and you will protect with your life's work.
that's right. That's right. And something that you've poured your passion, your love, your drive, your, without it sounding cliche, blood, sweat, and tears into,
Mhm. Mhm.
to give it form, to give it life, so it can go out there into the world and be a better version of itself and
Absolutely.
have that
Mhm.
ripple out, right?
Yes. Absolutely love that. I love the imagery of the ripples. I think that's so necessary as we talk about walking into this world, walking amongst the world. What ripples do you want to leave behind? And are they real ripples or are they just imitations of something else? We
Yeah.
talk a lot about, the performance of women, especially right now in the season, being authentic, our most
Mm.
authentic self. And kind of what that encompasses for women is just really being both not only authentic to other people and not being as performative, but also being real to ourselves.
Yeah.
There's moments where we as women often kind of feel like we're in a jar and we have to kind of, perform in some areas or fish tank. It's kind of what I refer to it as
Yeah.
being in the fishbowl. And we're stuck in the fishbowl and we're told, to do all the things in the fishbowl. But when we get out of that water and we go into bigger waters, what do we do then? And we feel lost or maybe kind of unsure of direction. And so I think it's just so important that we always have those authentic talks with ourselves before we talk to other people. Being able to have the confidence to tell yourself in the mirror that you are walking out in the world, you are confident, you are strong, you are smart, you are capable,
Mhm.
and knowing that from the inside out is what kind of propels us to swim better when we're in those big waters.
Absolutely. And all that you've just described and the process involved with it, I understand there's a component in your own business and subsidiary businesses or arms that you've created that leans on that very well for individuals, an educational component, a support, and a structure, and so forth.
Mhm. Yes.
But in the same token, while that's prevalent and while that's necessary, I guess, for many, isn't really that the process of life experiences?
Mhm. I completely agree. I think that is it's the root of it all. The root of being able to express ourselves is to also be in tune with the fact that we intake and outtake, right? Just as much as we output is actually a reflection of all the inputs that we put in ourselves. So I think it's really, I love that you say that because we don't do that enough as women in areas. We want to input, but we never want to put it back out. And I think that comes from a place of conditioning, right? Both from our society and maybe even cultural areas of life where we're told that we don't have to put it out. We just need to soak it all, take it all in, right? And then there's other areas where we kind of also have to be real with ourselves, those internal conversations where the inputs and the outputs meet.
Mhm.
And what do we do in those spaces? Do we
Mhm.
just follow the rules, what everyone keeps telling us, or do we do something different? And again, I just lean on the fact that I've always been able to go against the grain in some areas. It wasn't always seen that way, but it was definitely an area where I've practiced that for such a long time that I feel more confident and I feel more myself when I'm
Mhm.
able to actually both take those inputs and push out those outputs at the same time.
Interesting. I find it interesting how you shared that it feels more natural to you to behave, do, or be in a certain way based
Mhm.
on your past behavior and your past circumstances. So your current circumstances have changed to a certain degree or a larger degree of you're not now, your past. So, where is that tipping point for you of going, I'm not my past, it's presented me opportunities, but how now can I move forward with a new me, being uncomfortable, but recognizing it's me? So, I'm not falling into my past behavior.
Mhm.
I'm fighting it as a battle rather than embracing it as an opportunity.
That's that personal development that, being able to sit in the middle of a 500 square foot apartment with being pregnant with a child, a toddler, and literally figuring out like, my kids' furniture is all together, but I went like I think maybe 3 weeks without a bed for myself, but my
Mm.
but my child had everything that he needed. And so it was very interesting understanding that personal sacrifice. What am I willing to go through to achieve the things that I want? And unfortunately, it got to that point where literally my child had all the needs that he could ever have. However, I was the one being kind of scarce to myself
Mhm.
and going through moments where I felt like I didn't, but also still needed to depend on certain people, things like, my parents at that point, making things happen for myself. I think that was the turning point to which I knew that if I can do this, then I can do something else. If I
Mm.
can do this, then I can do the next thing. If I can take care of sustaining myself and my children as a single mom, what else could I do? And
Mhm.
it really just again spurned that fire of the next step.
Right.
Mentally, you're knocking down this wall of uncomfortableness. And
Mhm.
while it's uncomfortable in the moment, we know that there's, some prosperity or some positive things happening on the other side of that. And I think honestly, that was like my mental tipping point of okay, if I can do this, then I can pivot and I can do this. If this is capable for me, then I can also do this on another level. And I think, again, that's just really where my mindset was being 21, very young, having children and, growing a family, but also understanding that doesn't mean that my life is over. It just means that I get to do it in a different way. And I also want to address that too, because a lot of women sometimes feel that way. And I definitely want to encourage women who are in similar spaces, emotional places, that you can pivot and you can find your own space and way too.
Right. Yeah. Have you identified in reviewing, because this isn't a new trek for you, you've been on this path for a while. Have you been able to identify times of when the past survival mode to a certain degree has revealed itself, even though you're like, but I've long past that. Why is
Mhm.
that past showing up again?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that really kind of developed into other personal relationships. So, like meeting my husband.
Mhm.
He's also very independent and for himself in a lot of areas, but knowing like going into that relationship and knowing what came from that, which eventually was marriage and more children, um, I think it was something that really told me like I don't have to keep one foot out, right?
Mm.
I don't have to wait for the shoe to drop. This is actually legit. This is real. And that point gave me enough confidence and security to want to step out in a different direction. And that worked on a personal level, but also in a professional way as I started to grow other
Mhm.
communities from that point as well, from that
Right.
sense of security that I was feeling from that relationship. So I feel like for a lot of people, depending on where you are, are things that are around you. Maybe there's a way that they too can kind of have that same security of knowing that, okay, the shoe's not dropping, this is real, and I can actually try to do other things now, and I don't have to worry so much about past things in my life creeping up, or past things in my life that I didn't feel as comfortable or confident in, knowing that I have this new confidence now to lean on.
Mm-hmm. What were some of those feelings, sensations, and that little voice, if you will, showed
Oh,
up for
sure.
you that said, are you sure? Do we have this? Are we second guessing ourselves? Can you really trust him? Do you really want to let down your guard?
Mm-hmm.
All of that. What was that dialogue? And I only asked because I think at times of true vulnerability, be it with others or yourself, is such a beautiful opportunity of growth. And
Yes.
sometimes we can go through that process so quickly that we don't even recognize the huge learning opportunity. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd like for you, if you're open, to break that down a little bit for the listeners so they can maybe identify with their own life.
Absolutely. So I guess one of the biggest ones was um obviously letting down my children. That was like a really big one. Stepping into that space, wanting to make sure they were going to be secured, obviously, and not just secured with food and clothing, but a promising, prominent future for them, so that they could go to the colleges and things that they wanted to do, so they could explore opportunities. Maybe they didn't even want to go to college, maybe they wanted to do something completely different. Just
Mhm.
wanting to be able to support them in that way. The other areas was those internal voices, as we talked about, those echo chambers that we tell ourselves.
Mhm.
But you're only this. I think that was the number one thing that sometimes maybe knee jerk in that process. But I'm just a mom in this apartment. I'm just
Mhm.
a designer who only does this. It's always that but, right? And
Right.
so I had to teach myself a long-term practice, teach
Mhm.
myself to take the buts out.
Mhm.
And I had to teach myself over and over again that it is one, okay to fail. And I think that has been a long rivet for myself, not just from being a single mom, but just in general. Like, I learned best in some areas when I wasn't winning. And I
Right.
learned a lot when I wasn't able to complete or finish. I learned much more from the failures than the wins sometimes. And that started to dissipate a little bit more. And that kind of worried me. Like, maybe I'm doing too good,
Mm.
that type of echo chamber in my head.
Mm.
Maybe I'm doing too well. But if that's the case, why am I still here? you know
Okay.
all those types of things that we would tell ourselves, that we'd had to literally talk in the mirror. I'm confident, I'm strong, I'm capable. That didn't come until after this kind of series of understanding these echoes that I tell myself, that maybe it's too much, maybe it's not enough, maybe you're not doing enough in some
Mhm.
areas.
Mhm.
So those are the main things that I can clearly hear myself saying 14 years ago
Wow.
to myself in looking in my bathroom mirror. I clearly remember having those conversations.
Wow, that's interesting. It is interesting to see how we see ourselves from that time
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and how possibly it can take us back to that moment. And I don't know if it did for you viscerally as you share it out loud.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I'm sharing this, I am literally like spanning it mentally in my head, like literally being in that apartment, and literally just being able to, the joy that we were able to experience in this space where typically for any other person would not be joyful.
Mm.
The ability to persevere, and that resilience that I continued to carry through those moments when it didn't feel so good, and it really
Mhm.
felt like there was not enough footholding in areas. But
Mhm.
somehow, some way through, and I really attest that to our faith, really, that we were able to get through these moments that felt like we couldn't, and we replace that with moments and inspiration of things that we can.
Right.
So, yeah.
Fascinating. Fascinating how, as human beings, we all dissect and navigate challenges and opportunities, possibly in a different way, but really kind of in the same way.
Hmm. I completely
I,
agree. I think there's always a level where we see each other and each other. And wherever you are in the world, I feel like there's always that level of innate visibility. And I think that's something too that also gave me a little bit of confidence, is knowing that even though I was in that small town and being in that small apartment, I understood there were other people like that in the world. And that also made me feel a little bit more less alone, and still very encouraged to step out and do my own thing. I think that was the most empowering thing that I could possibly do for myself, that continued to forge this yes I can kind of mentality for me, was knowing that the more that I was stepping into my realm, the more that I felt, extra eyes, extra people, extra, not necessarily support, but just kind of bystanders, right? Like, what's her next step? What's she doing? Is she legit? And I think that helped encourage me and encourage other people behind me to say, you know what, she doesn't have it all figured out. She's not the greatest person in the world per se, but she is definitely doing some things. And I want to be more encouraged in that way to step out and do my own thing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting and really important to, just as we do with ourselves, to be able to identify the good in
Mhm.
others.
Yes.
And there are moments or attributes that other people carry that we may not agree with. But to a certain degree, from my perspective, who am I to judge?
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
I'm
That's totally
not.
it.
So if whatever they present to the world and how they present it, and I can see the light of good that they're projecting to the world,
Yes.
isn't that what I should use as fuel for me to continue my path and journey, rather than it being, I'm going to throw out the baby with the bathwater
Right.
scenario, right?
Yes, totally. And I feel like that is exactly one of the main reasons why I felt so confident being in my skin, was that I felt like so many people around me in that time were just kind of going with the flow and going with the trend and just doing what, again, society wants us to do. What do you do, at 21, being a single mom? Do you go into this workforce mode of just providing, and stifling yourself further and further? Do we go
Mm-hmm.
back into the space of, I'm going to try to, relive some of my childhood because I felt like some of it was taken, and absorbed in
Right.
some areas. There's so many different ways that you can take that type of feeling and manifest it into something else. I just chose to take that particular feeling and put it back into myself,
Yeah.
and use that to empower myself to move forward, so that it does create other opportunities, not just for my children, but for myself. And for a lot of women, that may seem just a little bit selfish, but it really is a matter of understanding who I was and what I wanted for myself before I could think about putting that toward any other project or person. If I can't take care of myself, if I can't love myself, if I can't appreciate myself, then what are the bigger signaling messages that I'm sending to my children? What are the bigger messages that I'm sending to myself by
Mm-hmm.
doing those things? And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, that is the most less selfish thing that I could possibly do, was to empower myself and manifest that the opportunity to do bigger and greater things based on my circumstance.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love that, Danielle. I love it. Amazing.
Thank you.
So, where do you go from here? Do you have an agency? You have an educational arm. You do great community work. You have your own podcast.
I think
Wow.
just sharing more, telling more. Again, we talked about, the things that inspire me to keep doing. What is the thing that is, what characteristic has really helped me push myself forward or grow in any way, shape, or form, and that's just to go.
Mm.
There's no time like the present. I know that sounds so cliche, but there is no time like the present. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have a yes every single time. In fact, I encourage the no's because I think it's important that we understand and hone in on the things that really spur us to move forward. And if we hear the yes all the time, we'll
Yeah.
never really know if we're never really challenged in that way. So next step for me is just to keep going, keep building. And I think for a lot of women out there who are in a place where they're ready, like to scale or, get bigger or grow in that way, that they really rely on that gut feeling. They'll know, when it's time to grab that extra person or hire that VA, or, they'll know when it's time to, get the nanny for the house because you're going to go do something else. They'll know when it's time to invest in a relationship. And again, going back to that fine tuning of self. When you know yourself, you're able to really, really, really understand the next step for yourself. And sometimes we're not as ready for that, but doing it out of good intention, doing it out of good faith, I think is the other area that, we as women have more innate capabilities to do than our male counterparts.
Yeah, possibly. But I know quite a few intuitive men out there, so
they're getting it. I will definitely give them that. I think we have come far, leaps and bounds for men. I love having them on. We had a recent guest on our podcast, and it was really funny to hear his perspective on how he's been supportive of women over the Spirit series of time. And it was just really cool to have that dynamic, men and women, how we see things and how we interact with the world. So it was really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. So even though in this entire conversation, there's been a lot of references that you have made towards women in empowering and supporting and gut instinct and all that stuff, I would like to add to that just because we're all talking about women, it doesn't mean it doesn't apply to men.
Absolutely.
So if we remove the label of women out of this conversation, it would still be applicable to you, whatever gender you choose to identify with. Let's go with that.
Sure. Absolutely. Completely agree. Again, everyone can learn from everyone. And I feel like that's really important as we talk about just in general, being good in the world, putting out good in the world. That's really the deep down message that I hope that anyone hears this is really getting. Like, in what way can I hone in on my good thing? And then in what way can I keep that good thing and put it out in the world?
Beautiful. I love this conversation. Thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing your insights, your wisdom, your experiences. It's been a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.